With that, it's time to kick off our first power panel of the day that will discuss a very relevant topic, but with a twist. Never waste a slowdown. Let me first invite on stage a Tata veteran for decades who doesn't believe in Superman CEOs, but he does have faith in the art of leadership, which according to him cannot be taught or learned. You're either born a good leader or you aren't. He's been instrumental in shaping decisions at several Tata Group companies such as Tisco or Tata Steel, Voltas, Tata Sky and TCS, each a leader in its space today. And even though he was always the finance guy, it really never stopped him from managing people or negotiating deals. Please put your hands together as I invite on stage former director, Tata Sons, Mr. Ishaat Hussain. Thank you for joining us, sir. A gentleman who completed his BTech in Mechanical Engineering from IIT Kanpur and PhD from Cornell University, USA, and went on to work with General Motors Research and Development Center in Detroit from 1979 to 1993. Thereafter, he was appointed as General Manager in Mahindra, and during his R&D tenure, he led the development of the Scorpio, which is India's first indigenously built SUV. Today, as the Managing Director of M&M, he is steering the fortunes of one of India's biggest automobiles company. I'd like to invite on stage Mr. Pawan Goenka, Managing Director, Mahindra and Mahindra. He was the chairman and CEO of PepsiCo India Holdings, a subsidiary of PepsiCo Inc., prior to his appointment at the Aditya Birla Group. He has also served as the head of business across the Middle East, African region, and India at Nokia Corporation. An engineer from IIT Madras, he also holds an MBA from IIM Calcutta, a firm believer in never waste a crisis. Let's welcome on stage Mr. D. Shivakumar, Group Executive President, Corporate Strategy and Business, Aditya Birla Group. Welcome to the stage, sir. Technology runs in his blood. And that's not surprising, given that he is a Bachelor of Engineering in Electronics and Communications. As a business leader, he comes with a rich experience and expertise in driving transformation across the IT and telecom sectors, both in India and overseas. As Managing Director and Regional General Manager, he drives IBM's sales, marketing, services, and delivery operations across India and South Asia. That he loves technology is clearly evident in his role as an active angel investor. Let's welcome Mr. Karan Bajwa, Managing Director, IBM India, on stage. Welcome to the stage, sir. And moderating this session, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Editor Outlook Business, Ms. N Mahalakshmi. Over to you, ma'am.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute delight to put together this event every year. This is the 4th year. And this year I'm particularly excited, despite the fact that it has been a fairly somber year. All of us have been just reporting about the slowdown, this company going down, sales going down 40%, all of this negative news. And the campaign for this year actually came through when I came across an article in the Huffington Post some months ago. It was actually an article written in 2011, which obviously I missed, and after several years, I found it now, but extremely relevant. And it really opened my eyes to what actually became the campaign for this year, Never Waste a Slowdown. And that's what we're going to discuss in this panel. And it had very interesting statistic. The article said since 1790 to 2010, roughly 220 years, in United States, there were an estimated 47 recessions. Of course, many of you may not take these numbers very seriously because we know most of these numbers are not absolutely accurate, but it still gives you a reasonably good picture. So in these 220 years, there were 47 recessions in the United States. The definition of a recession is 2 or 3 quarters of consecutive decline in economic activity. That means you have a recession every 4.5 years, or on average, you have seen about a recession in every 4.5 years over the past 220 years. And yet, some of the most iconic companies, right from Procter & Gamble to IBM, Walt Disney, many of them were really born in recession years. And then there was also a Kauffman Foundation-sponsored research in 2009, which said that more than 50% of the companies in the Fortune 500 list of 2009 were actually born in recession years. So the whole lot of examples, General Electric in 1890, when the economy was gripped, US economy was gripped by a UK panic. IBM in 1896, US was in recession. General Motors in 1908. Disney in 1923, it was founded, but it really was came into prominence only in 1929 when it was the Great Depression period. Apple was founded in 1975, but the way we know Apple, the starting point was really 2001 when they launched the iPod, just 1 year after the dot-com boom. By now, I think everybody is fed up. What is this statistic? This reeks of selection bias, because this woman is just looking at survivors and saying 50% of the survivors were born in recession years. But let me tell you, I thought about this. Usually, the media is really damned for looking at the spreading negativity, looking at the glass half empty, reporting only on the negative side and all of that. So this is our redemption time. We are looking at things positively, looking at the glass half full. But on a more serious note, if we were to just say that this world is 1-0 and in a very bad recession, you either die, or if you are a survivor, you do come out stronger and healthier. And the discussion that we are going to steer today is, if we were to belong to the later, and I presume that all of us in this room would want to belong to the later, how do we really think about this, and how do we really go about dealing with slowdown? So we have a really lovely panel, right from somebody who has been there, done that, to CEOs who are actually driving on the driver's seat and doing this right now. So let me start with Ishaat Saab. You have seen companies go through existential crisis more than once. How do we really go about getting out of a shithole if companies were not really prepared to deal with a slowdown, and you are caught in a slowdown?
So I think what we have seen today, what Vaidhi said and what the minister also said, you shouldn't be caught with your pants down, so to say, when the recession hits you. Pardon the use of the phrase, but I couldn't think of any better way of expressing myself. You have to, management is all about managing risk. You have to be very clear about the system that we work. The way it works is that it moves in cycles. You'll have ups and you'll have downs. As the minister himself said, no economy grows at 8%, for 100 years. You will have ups and you'll have downs. So the starting point, in my view, is that every management must have a plan B ready all the time for a recession, for a slowdown. How deep it will be, whether it will be a recession or not, if we want to get technical, that's another matter. But most managements today, and this, the quality of management, the learning of management is now of a very high order. I think most managements are prepared for things to slow down or to change. The pace will change. Of course, you can never forecast what the depth of it will be. For example, my old company, Tata Motors, is today seeing a drop of 50% in its heavy commercial vehicles. Now, no matter what analysis you do, I don't think you were ready for that. But having said that, they do have plans in action, and those plans are being put into action. The key, in my opinion, is that you must constantly innovate. And you gave a whole string of industries which came up or changed. Innovation, you've got to continuously keep your innovation engines going. And from Sriram, you told us how you innovated to how you treat your truck drivers differently. I think that is the way to go forward. And it's, you don't have to think of big bang things. You've got to think of many, many small things. So I think Pawan is in the midst of it. I sincerely believe that there is a crisis today in the auto industry. I'm still associated with some suppliers to the auto industry. They're working 2 days a week, 3 days a week. So we can't really wish it away that there isn't a problem. There is a problem. And I think if I may ask Pawan to address that, he's better equipped to do so.
So are you thinking big or thinking small?
So thank you first for saying that there is a slowdown in auto industry, because based on what the minister had said, I was wondering whether there is a slowdown or not. Let me start off by saying that there's a famous sort of phrase that crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And I truly believe in that. And in my sort of management career, this is the 4th slowdown that I'm looking at. And each slowdown is a learning experience and something that you do which holds you in sort of good state for next 5-6 years till the next slowdown. I had recently spoken in an industry conference on this subject, and I had given 10 sort of points of what to do and not to do. Since this is a panel discussion and I have a few minutes, I'll only talk about 3 things that I believe are most important. The most important thing to me is that in a slowdown, we should never mortgage the future. And that's very tempting in cost-cutting drive to put on hold long-term programs. In auto industry, the investment cycle is 3 to 4 years. And the slowdown cycle these days is 5 to 6 years. So if every slowdown you stop investment for product, then you will never have products for future. So that's one very important thing of not mortgaging the future when you're trying to fix and take care of present. The second one is that you need to make systematic changes in your processes, in the way you do business, so that when the good times come, and they always do, you are ready to sprint. You have to come out of a slowdown much fitter, much leaner for the future. And it's always the case that when there is good time for 4 or 5 years, no matter how well you manage your company, some fat is going to accumulate on your body. And slowdown is the time to go to the gym and get rid of that sort of fat and become lean again, ready for the next 5 or 6 years. And the third one I would say is that in a slowdown, if you have a good balance sheet, then there are always opportunities for inorganic growth that you normally will not get in good times. So in a slowdown, it's always good to go into it with a healthy balance sheet and then look for opportunities that you will have both locally and internationally for getting into businesses, expanding the line that you are in, or even looking at some new things. A lot has been talked about what to do, and perhaps one of the most important thing in what to do, beyond my 3 points, is to keep the employee morale high. In a slowdown, there is always apprehension, there's always a concern on what will happen to my job, where will I go, and you need to communicate, and ensure that employees are happy, or not, I shouldn't say happy, employees are not concerned about themselves. And second, if you are the big brother like auto OEMs normally are, you have to ensure that you don't pass on your woes to your dealers and your suppliers on both sides, because their ability to manage a slowdown is less than an OEM's ability, and therefore you need to support them, just like what he had mentioned just now. You need to support them rather than pass on your sort of difficulties to them.
Pawan, does that really happen? Because the proof of the fact that it doesn't happen really lies in the fact that it is most of the large companies, even when their sales gets affected, they are able to protect their margins. So how else protect their margins? So the only and the biggest way that you start maintaining margins is by squeezing the suppliers.
So this is the point that I'm making about who will do well in the long run and who will do well only for a short time. You have to live in this ecosystem, right? I recited a doha from Rahim in this conference, that Rahiman vipda hoon bhali, jo thode din hoye, hit anhit ya jagat mein, jaan pade sab koye. I don't know if everybody understood what that meant, but this is when you understand who is your fair weather friend and who is your true friend, when there's a slowdown. Therefore, suppliers and dealers will remember how the OEMs treated them when times were tough. And if you treat them well, in a reversal of situation, they will take care of you and they will help you. So I think this is not something that you build over one slowdown or over 6 months or 3 months. This has to be built as a culture in the organization, that how do you treat your suppliers? It's just not about slowdown. And how do you treat your dealers? Now, like you said, it's very easy for an OEM because we have perhaps more arm twisting ability to push inventory to the dealers and say, I'm doing well, or squeeze the suppliers and again take away. But that won't help you, because the suppliers will go out of business before you will go out of business. And if even a small supplier goes out of business, my plant stops. Therefore, to protect the suppliers is extremely important. Same thing with dealers. Dealers are your captive businessmen in almost all cases. And if I dump inventory on them, they increase their working capital, then many of the dealers will go bankrupt, as is happening today. Many dealers are going bankrupt because they're not able to manage working capital. Right. Therefore, any OEMs who does not take care of this is taking care of the short term, but not the long term. And that's what I mean when I said don't mortgage the future. Because there are things that you can do which look very good and right for the short term, but they'll always compromise with the long term. And well-managed company will always ensure that you don't mortgage the future.
Sure. Karan, from your point of view, it's a lot less about suppliers and all of that. It's more internal to the company. How do you innovate and remain relevant? So how do you look at a slowdown?
So let me just actually step back and give you a sense of how we are seeing this from a technology industry standpoint.
And also any learnings from IBM, because IBM itself is an iconic example of a company that has faced severe crisis, come back, not to say that it has remained, and it has continued to face challenges. So any historic lessons from IBM, and of course, how you're studying now?
Sure. As Pawan said, the verdict is still out there on whether there is a slowdown or not, so let's see. But if I just look at our view from the last 2 years, and what have we seen systemically across different sectors, and it's widespread. Typically we've seen one sector get impacted, but over the last 2 years, let's relay what's happened. The first thing that impacted us as a company was telecom. And it started 2 years ago with the new operator coming up. And given the fact that we had multi-year outsourcing relationships with the 3 largest telecom companies, Bharti, Vodafone, Idea, and we almost had the responsibility to support them in that transition and tough journey, our multi-year contracts took a major hit. The only good news I see at the end of 2 years is that they're all still with us, in spite of the fact that there was a merger that happened. We still stay on. But it was bruising for everyone. Just as we were coming out...
As long as they're there, they'll be with you.
I wish them well, always. Just as we were coming to terms with what was happening in telecom, what happened in airline, at least 2 providers, Jet and Air India, we were the core IT providers, and one vanished, the other one's in a very tough spot. And in that industry, in hindsight, I think we over-leveraged, we over-invested. We should have taken some calls early enough, but you understand the importance of IT in these industries. 1 hour IT down, the network, the airline comes on its knees. It was very difficult. The elbow room of doing something was very different, but hindsight is always 20/20, as they say. And as we reconciled that Jet's going to go off and Air India is going to be for a long time in a tough situation, auto industry started happening. And you all know the data points on the auto industry, 12 sequential months, given the situation. The first thing that gets cut is non-essential spend and costs that you can avoid. Something that you got to absolutely do, you focus on that. And while auto industry was coming around, the banking industry suddenly, and banking is more widespread, very emotional subject. And I'm not going to go into the debate of who's impacted, who's not, but even if one bank goes down, the cascading effect of that across multiple banks, but then more importantly across industries, is very, very broad. And these 4 to 5 sectors form the core of any enterprise technology company. So as we sit here and look at this, it's a very tough situation in that sense. What have we done? What have been our learnings? And you said it, IBM's gone through a multi-decade transformation journey. Many times over, we've kind of been seemingly hitting the wall, and we've emerged stronger as a very different company. And this time again, IBM's going through a transition on many levels. If I simply look at what we are today versus what we were 5 years ago, 50% of the company is absolutely new. 50% of the revenue did not exist 5 years ago. So we were going through a massive transformation on our own. And one of the challenges that you have as a company when you are transforming and you are in a good zone is that you don't embrace the transformation levers as much. So in a way, this tough situation over the last 2 years has also given us an opportunity to embrace our transformation much faster, bringing automation to clients, driving the cloud adoption in clients, having real AI conversations with clients. It has allowed us to accelerate our journey on those levers with our clients, which normally I would have felt if the going was good, we would have had a slower adoption of that. The second thing we've done is, traditionally, we've always focused on the top customers in India. And I call, the India customer pyramid is very interesting. It's almost got a New York on top. The top, 500, BSE 500 almost look like any developed country environment. And our focus had been those top companies. But we actually pushed ourselves and said, let's go to the middle of the pyramid. And a good data point, we used to acquire about 100 customers every year, new customers. We pushed ourselves and said, let's go multiply this one. And now we're on a pace of over 1,000 customers, 1,000 new customers. They're small, but we're getting new customers. That's a new muscle we built. We took a fundamental approach on our cost structures, which we would not have done in a good environment. We brought down our costs significantly. So some of those things, I would say, that allowed us to really use this opportunity, though it's very difficult to replace the size of revenue that got eroded or diminished. Yet this is allowing us to build a muscle across the organization that possibly we would not have done if there was an upward swing in that sense.
Sure. Shiv?
Yeah, so, thanks, Mahalakshmi. The first thing I'd say is, are we looking at reality? I think everybody is subjective. 90% of the countries of the world are seeing a slowdown in activity. That is the truth. Okay, some people accept it, some people don't. Now, if you take the world as 210 countries, you're talking about 180 countries seeing slower growth than before, number one. Number two, the global world output is up 3%, whereas global trade is up 1%. So for the first time, you're seeing what we call reverse globalization. Not happening. Okay, so that's a very distinct trend. What is different about this slowdown, or this, whatever you want to call it, economic activity, compared to 2008? There's a lot more social media this time. Social media didn't exist in 2008. So the chatter you see and the opinions you find are dramatically off the charts order right now. Everybody has an opinion whether there's a slowdown or not because of social media. In 2008, we accepted the verdict of central banks, governments, and economists. And that's where the debate ended, not today. Everybody with a Twitter account is an economist. Okay, so that's a big shift. Okay? So
also, there is diversity of opinion on social media. Not everybody accepts there is a slowdown. While in 2008 or earlier, you would have accepted that generally, yaar, dhanda kaise chal raha hai, nahi manda hai. So, it's just the business people who form the sentiment. Now, everybody on Twitter has a say.
Yeah, so let me give you a different definition of slowdown. Through my career, and I'll give you two examples, one now and the second one maybe when we come to the second round. See, how does slowdown affect a leader or a manager? First is, you're working in a company, your business is growing slower than competition. That's a slowdown. Your board and everybody holds you accountable for that. That is slowdown, whether you like it or not. Second, you work in an industry, you have slowed down, the industry has slowed down. That's good, because you can blame somebody else. Third is a situation when you work in an industry where you slowed down, industry has slowed down, country has slowed down. That's the best situation. Because then nobody can, point a finger at you. Because everything is down. Okay, let me give you lessons from companies and how companies behave in slowdowns with two personal examples. First, I go to 1994. 1994, for those of you who remember, there was El Nino, and coffee production in Brazil was badly impacted. Coffee prices doubled in India in 1994. Okay? I was the regional manager of South for Hindustan Lever. Coffee was one of my portfolios. And coffee sales collapsed, absolutely collapsed. Okay, now here's the marketing department saying, nothing's gone, the sales guys are not doing their job, they are ineffective, now let's go pummel them. That's what they did. They kept blaming the sales guys. The poor sales guys is saying, I don't know, I'm going to the outlet, but I'm not able to sell. I'm just not able to do anything. Okay? After about 6 months, we recognized that sales were down by 30 to 40%. Consumption was down. Okay? Then we actually did an analysis, and we found that for an average 700 square feet Tamil Nadu household, they were spending as much on rent as much on coffee. It was that severe, the coffee price increase. So in a slowdown, the first thing which happens in organizations, and most people won't accept it, but that's the truth, there are silos which are built in, and each silo tells the other silo why they are wrong. If you're a good leader, the first thing you must recognize is bring them all together and say, hey guys, I don't want this fight on the floor. I want a collective answer as to how we grow back. Next, one of the biggest realizations for me in that slowdown was consumers actually valued better quality. So we put a big program to improve quality of coffee, and that's what actually saved us. We introduced smaller packs into the market because consumers could not afford to buy a 50 rupee pack. They wanted a 10 rupee pack. Okay, so my learning from that first big slowdown of mine was that silos are real in organizations. Depending on whom it suits, they behave badly. And in a slowdown, the most important lesson for a CEO is unity. It doesn't matter if engineering has loused up, sales has loused up, somebody, unite them very quickly. Because the more division you have in the company, the less you will fight the slowdown. You'll fight yourselves. That's the big lesson that I learned in my first slowdown. Okay? And the second round, I'll give you my 2008 example.
Sure. So is that hard to drive consensus on what has gone wrong, what is creating this slump, and therefore, how you should go about making a decision?
Are you saying within the company?
Within the company, because I thought he's
so
you are working in silos, and that's
so let's
usually
look at
just in trying to understand what is causing the slowdown. Is this internal? Is it between the departments, approach, industry, economy, whatever?
So consensus is on two sides. One is consensus on what is outside that is affecting the slowdown, and consensus on what is inside. So it's very easy to get a consensus on outside factors. Everybody will agree in the management meeting that yes, it is the interest rate, it is the sentiment, it is oil prices or whatever it might be, and that's not a big problem. Where the problem comes is the inside. As Shivakumar said, that marketing would blame sales, and sales would blame the product, and product will blame quality, and so on and so forth. Sometimes there would be finger pointing, because when things are going well, everybody is happy, everybody takes credit for it. When things are going bad, everybody wants to say, I'm doing my job well, but others are not. And as he said very rightly, that the leader's most important task at that point is to avoid the silos and ensure that the whole leadership team is working together. And what happens is, in the organization which has 10,000 people, it's the 7-8 people who everybody is looking at to see how are they behaving at this time, and depending on what they see in leadership behavior, the whole organization behaves, whether we like it or not, but that's how most organizations function. And therefore, if the head of R&D is behaving in a certain way, then everybody in R&D starts behaving that way, because he is their leader. And therefore, to bring that leadership team to work together as a single team is very important. I would just take an example of what happened in October. October month was one of the best months for the auto industry as a whole in the recent 14-15 months, and for Mahindra in particular, where we did better than the market. I think that in one case that he said. And what we did in this particular month was at the very beginning of the month, the leadership team got together and said, we need to win October. No matter what happens, we just need to win October. It doesn't matter what we have to do. Because there's so much sort of demotivation that is set up in the whole ecosystem. Suppliers are not supplying because there is no order. Manufacturing plants are not running 10 days in a month. The dealers don't have customers walking in. And therefore, we must create October as a win. And once we do that, then hopefully there will be a virtuous cycle that will set in. And this is where the whole organization just worked together as one team, without any question, without anybody asking anything to any other function. And we did win in October, okay? We probably cannot do that kind of thing every month. I wish we could, but we did win in October. And that's the point that Shivakumar has made, and I fully agree with, that internal alignment, which is more difficult than understanding and accepting external causes. Like if the whole country is in slowdown, then everybody is happy because I'm not to blame in that sense. Internal alignment is very important and most difficult task for the top leader and the leadership team to achieve.
Sure. Ishaat Saab, now, one part of it is internal alignment, as Shiv and Dr. Goenka are saying. But to first understand whether the slowdown is worth investing in, whether a change that is happening is truly driven by either industry or because of factors unique to a company, or something that is secular, and therefore whether you should invest, whether you should push aggressively, or be in a wind-down mode or reconcile to, mortality of an industry or company, which often most companies stay in denial about that. So how do you really look at it? Are there any factors that you ever thought, because in a core industry, there have been often situations in steel where there is global glut now, earlier. So how do you think about a business situation like that, and how do you decide?
I think the two examples which have been given, I think they are episodic. And by and large, there is a consensus, whether there is not a slowdown or there is a slowdown. There may be some instances where you may have a debate, but that debate can't go on for too long. I will share with you very briefly, when I was walking up, when I was being introduced, it was mentioned that I've survived an existential crisis. And we did, Tata Steel, I was the finance director in 1992, when, if you remember, suddenly we had reforms. The steel industry, which had protection of 60%, protection came down to 5%. Steel prices were decontrolled. Steel prices used to be controlled by Government of India, so Government of India said, now that we've put you into play in the international arena, no price controls from us, but no import duties either. Now, Tata Steel in 1992 was very different to what it is today. It was a junked-out plant, very old, obsolete technologies, poor quality. I'm sure if you check your quality records, Pawan, you will find a lot of quality complaints going to Tata Steel. So we had a real existential crisis. And how did we just come around to and recognize the crisis was that I, as finance director, put up a forecast for the financial year, I think it was 93, 94, which shows that Tata Steel was heading for a huge loss. Huge loss. I mean, it would run into about 1,000 crores or something like that. So that shook everybody up. And we had a very cohesive management team, which all of you do have, and you may have your little differences of opinion, but I think there was considerable understanding of the realities of the situation, cohesive team, and that is where leadership came in, where Mr. Tata, who had become chairman then, Jamshed had become the managing director, Jamshed Irani, I was the finance director, and we had 2 or 3 other directors. We met, we got the management team. I remember we met in the chambers, a late night meeting going into the early hours. Action plan was chalked out. And for us, it was just not a 2-day exercise. We were a bloated company with 80,000 employees at that time. And now we are down to 30 and to 36,000. So it was also explaining to the unions. So I, with Jamshed and my other colleagues, we went from unit to unit, sat with the unions, showed them the numbers, because there was a crisis on our hands, but you have to build credibility. You have to build credibility. You have to be very, very transparent, extremely transparent in what you say. That's the only thing which will build up trust. And I'm very happy to say that 93, 94, we didn't make a loss, because we all worked together. We charted out plans. You know, Tisco is like the Indian Army. You tuck, 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 and then you go. And touch wood, we survived and survived well. So these are the things you have to do. Leadership is crucial. What Pawan mentioned, keeping the morale up while you are doing difficult things, to keep the morale up. Now, these are where you really talk about quality of leadership.
So I want to pose the same question to you, Pawan, because at this point in time, the way the automobile industry is positioned also for Mahindra, now there is this talk about EVs and so on and so forth. So which technology to bat? Really, should you be supporting dealers or not? Because you don't know how, the way in which the new cars are going to be sold. What is going to be the technology? Should you be investing in better products, technology, shop floor, all of that? Because this could be a paradigm shift and absolutely make all of these investments irrelevant. I think that is an insecurity every automobile company in the world today is living with.
So let me just make two comments on what Ishaat said, one on the lighter vein, and I hope you don't mind. When I came back to India in 93 and joined Mahindra, I was told that till recently you couldn't negotiate with Tata Steel because they said, if you want to steel, this is the price, which is not true anymore, and we can negotiate with Tata Steel.
Is that good or bad?
I'm sorry?
Is that good or bad for Tata Steel?
I think sorry, you want to say something?
Well, I think if you went to telco, they would have said the same thing about that.
Yes, that's true. But see, in all fairness, a little bit digression, that what has happened in India from 91, 92 till today is all good. The reason I say all good is that there's so much competition that has come in, no matter which business you are in, that you have to now, as a business, fight for the customer, right? Gone are the days when there was a wait list for cars or anything, phones or gas cylinder or whatever. And since you have to fight for the customer, the effort that you put in for quality, for technology, for price competitiveness is much, much, much higher than what it was when you were in a licensed Raj and you could sell whatever you could make. Whether you are a large supplier or an OEM, doesn't matter, right? And that's the reason the winners are the customers, end of the day. And we are all customers, right? Winners are the customers, and if you go back to 91, 92 and what you could buy at a given price and what you can buy today, there's a huge difference. Second point I just want to make very quickly is that there are things that you can do in a slowdown to improve the systems and processes that you cannot do in good times. Because whether it's a union that you're dealing with, whether it's plants that you're dealing with, there are a lot of things in the name of slowdown that you can fix that you cannot do it. And every time there's a slowdown, we have to make a list of things that we need to use this slowdown to correct and ensure that we are better off after the slowdown. Now, coming back to your question, it's a very important question because this slowdown is in some sense coming at the wrong time for the auto industry. There's never a good time for slowdown, but coming at a wrong time because of two very important things that are happening, which are making it difficult, more difficult. One is the whole BS6 transition that everybody here is aware of. And come 31st March, we have to stop selling BS4 vehicle.
Correct.
And those who are in the industry will know that to have a cutoff date for selling is very difficult to manage because I can control how much I manufacture. I cannot control how much I sell and when. Right? So that is a big sort of disruption that's going to happen in the industry. And second is change in technology with electric vehicles, with Ola, Uber, that is mobility, the whole dynamics of mobility is changing.
Yeah.
And therefore industry needs to have the strength, financial strength, to invest for these things and prepare for it. And therefore going into the BS6, going to the high technology requirements with a balance sheet that is stressed for many companies right now, makes it that much more difficult. And there's no doubt that 5 years from now, 7 years from now, auto industry will look very different than what it is today. How the cars are used will be very different. What cars will be sold, nobody knows what they would be, but they'll be very different than what is today. And therefore, for auto industry, OEM suppliers, and suppliers even more than the OEMs, because OEMs finally will make some cars with 4 wheels and a steering wheel and seats. Suppliers don't know what they will end up making. So for them to create scenarios to be able to cater for everything is the most challenging task. Nothing to do with the slowdown, but most challenging task, whether it'll be diesel or petrol, whether it'll be electric or hybrid, whether ICE engine or electric vehicle, whether people will buy cars to self-own or whether they'll use Ola, Uber more, what should you design for? And that makes it that much more difficult. And hence, while we are currently working on tackling the slowdown, which is an immediate short-term problem, the bigger emphasis, frankly, is how to manage the scenarios that are emerging, multiple scenarios that are emerging.
Sure.
And we don't know. Nobody knows today. Nobody knows today which scenario will play out.
Sure. Karan, this must be a problem with you too, because you need to really understand and be very clear about which technology you bet, what kind of projects you should do, what you should be in wind down mode. So how do you deal with that?
I guess there's no easy answer to that. What do you do and not do? But investing in the time of a slowdown is a no-brainer. If you freeze in that zone, you will not come out of it. In my view, one of the difficult situations of handling a slowdown is actually the decisions you took when you were growing. Because when you are growing, you are not, let me use the word, being cautious in many times. And this is so evident in multiple industries. And I'm very concerned about, I love the startup ecosystem, and I'm very concerned about the longevity of their growth and the sustainability of their growth. Who is to blame for a lot of the businesses going under? Who is really to blame for Jet Airways? I think we have to understand the decisions we took during the growth times that will come back to bite us. I foreknow one from personal experience working in IBM that in the 108th, we are in the 108th year of being a company. So many times we've taken some very bold decisions that have fundamentally rebooted the company. In this 5 to 6 year transition as a company, many people have had opinions about whether IBM will survive or not. And just a year and a half ago, we actually made the biggest investment ever in the history of the company when we bought Red Hat for $34 billion, which is the largest software acquisition in the history of the world. So I guess, it's the decisions you take at the time that you are in a tough zone and what you live with from a growth environment. The other thing I also sort of, feel that we tend to miss is the people part. Slowdowns allow you to build a very massive muscle in the organization, one of resilience. Organizations that have not seen a downturn do not have the resilience muscle. I know from a personal, we're living this every day now. In our case, about 25% of our global workforce sits in India. So how the people feel, how they come to work, how they show up to work, impacts the whole company. So the employee engagement pulse, which is a very simple metric of determining whether the employees are happy or not, and how they're feeling, is a very good benchmark. And a slowdown or a disrupted environment is a perfect alibi to say, oh, morale is down because there is a slowdown. So we actually took upon ourselves as a challenge this year that when we have the toughest situation from a business standpoint, we will go out and over-communicate and over-engage with our employees. Very interestingly, our pulse surveys, engagement surveys just came out a couple of weeks back, and we actually improved 2 points of engagement. So I think it's the perfect time to hold on to your employees, over-engage. As Shiv said, it's not about giving positive news, it's about giving clarity. It's about giving clarity to your people. So some of those things is what I believe needs to be done in a slowdown environment.
Sure, that's the toughest thing, Shiv. So how do you keep morale up, especially when the monetary situation, that's the easiest tool that's not available in times of a slowdown. So it's that much more harder. So how do you keep morale up?
Yeah, so I told you I'll give you my second example, and that was Nokia in 2008. Nokia in 2008 was a $3 billion company, growing massively, India's largest multinational. 2008 was a real slowdown. And I don't think anybody disagreed whether it was a slowdown. That was the good part. Oil prices were $140. And Goldman Sachs was predicting that it will go to $200. And the whole world was worried whether it would happen or not. So here was a successful company, but the external signals were not good. The first thing I recognized, a few lessons I learned from there while I was preparing for this, is it's funny that in a slowdown, even in the most successful company, people assume the worst. That's something you have to guard against. You have to recognize that people are people, emotions are emotions. They will assume the worst. You have to work with it. Second, the ecosystem is strapped of cash. So whoever can underwrite inventory, whoever can underwrite something, will always help the ecosystem. But there are not many people in the ecosystem who can actually come forward and do that. Okay, some things you can do, some things you cannot. So in a slowdown, cash is the king right through the chain. Okay, if you can collect cash early, even better. If you cannot, then you're going to have a problem. That's the second lesson which all of us picked up. Third one is, even in a successful company in a slowdown, people started hopping jobs. So we lost about a few guys. Then I asked the HR department, what's happening? Why are good people leaving us at this point of time? Then we did a funny analysis, and it's true even today. We checked that people who are leaving us had very high EMIs. Their EMI as a percentage of their take-home salary was higher than 25%. They're very scared that they will not be able to pay it next year, so they wanted a job which was a higher paying job next year, and hence were moving out. Okay, and even today, when I look at my population, I always ask people who has the highest EMI, and you can be sure that they are in the market first. They are the guys who are always looking for the new job because they want the percentage payout to be smaller. That's the next lesson we learned. I said everybody assumes the worst, so it's very important for leaders to build positive stories. So while you need to face reality, you also need to enthuse and inspire people by giving them something which is working well, and how can we replicate that? That's just as important. Otherwise, everybody will wallow in self-pity. So you need to communicate. So one of the things we did then, which I hold even true today also, we started a weekly meeting. Every week, we'd all get together over a cup of tea and say, hey guys, what's happening? Talk, etc. Then somebody told me, Shiv, why don't you convert this into a weekly note and send it out every morning, every Monday morning? So from then to now, 10 years later, 11 years later, I still do that. Every Monday morning, I write to all my employees as to what did I learn the previous week. That's how that learning note started. Okay, so that was something we did. Next is a big lesson we learned, Nokia globally as well as India. Never throw money at salespeople in a slowdown. It builds the wrong behavior. The natural inclination is you throw more money at the sales guy, 1,000 rupees more, 5,000 rupees more. What we found was terrible. It provides exactly the wrong reasons why you are in sales. So that's something which I learned the hard way, and I never do after that. Mm-hmm. Okay, never throw money at salespeople in a slowdown. You get wrong behavior. I hope so. I hope CEOs are listening. Okay. Next, in terms of scenarios, the point which Pawan made, what we did was we said, what's the worst which can happen to us? And I think the worst was $2.5 billion will be from where we are at 3. We said, what's the best which can happen to us? We said 3.5. Okay. So the whole organization, the energy of the organization was aligned to the best scenario, 3.5. We said that's what we'll go for. Even if we hit 3.2, it's great, doesn't matter. But all our cost structure was aligned to the worst scenario. So everybody agreed in the meeting that we will not spend more. So we tried to convert as much cost into variable cost as possible, so that we didn't, hang ourselves in the process. Okay. Then we said we'll run 1 quarter at a time. Forget next year. 1 quarter at a time. 3.5 divided by 4. What would it be? Let's do that. If we win 1 quarter, let's go to the next quarter.
But then isn't that the opposite of what you were saying, that you have to think long term and not short term?
I come back to that. That's a good point. And I'll end it with that. The big lesson I learned as a CEO at that point of time, never be alone. Trust me, when you are alone as a CEO, devils happen in your mind. So even with my people, I would say, let's all sit together all the time, okay, and build a kind of a brotherhood of the underdogs, okay, that we're really fighting the world, but we are in it together. So never be alone is something which I would, spend time with people and spend time in the marketplace. What works in a slowdown, as you were asking, Mahalakshmi, is we found innovation always works. Buying stressed assets works. There are a lot of stressed assets which come up in a slowdown. Very good assets. Third thing which works is quality always works. Investing in advertising works. Okay, these are things that we've learned the hard way through many a slowdown. Okay,
Sure.
these are principles which you should never forget.
Sure,
Those are the long-term investments.
sure.
Yes, build
So,
on one point that
yeah,
I'm just about the slowdown. He mentioned that the 2008 slowdown, nobody questioned whether it was slowdown or not. Just want to contrast the numbers. Okay? In F09, which is 2008 primarily, for auto industry, Q1 was a growth, Q2 was flat, Q3 was a degrowth of 15%, Q4 was flat, and next year was the best ever growth that we had of 25%. So only one quarter was degrowth for auto industry. This time, we have had 5 quarters of degrowth. Last 2 quarters, every segment for the first time ever has degrown for 2 quarters in a row. And last quarter, there was a degrowth of 25% in the industry, which has not been seen since 2001. So that's just, I'm just taking an example of auto industry, how deep the slowdown is this time. And we need to, therefore, see what has to be done. And a lot of people are questioning whether it is a structural slowdown or a technical slowdown. I don't know. I hope it is not a structural. But a lot of people questioning that if it's lasted so long, whether it is really a structural slowdown.
sure. So the time is up, but we can take just a couple of questions if anybody has questions to ask.
Any one of you can answer this question. See, on the one hand, Minister is showing us the rosy picture, and the slowdown is they are in a denial mode. On the other hand, the statistics say something else. And so in this given scenario, how are you people keeping your morale up and your team morale up?
I would just say that it'll be a worse problem if the minister is showing doomsday and we are saying it's great. So I think everybody's doing their role, so we were good in that sense.
And he is not there to listen that.
I'm sure he'll get that.
I give an example, and quite often, look at many measures. Business schools. India has the highest number of business schools in the world. The placement season is going to start now. I was talking to the IIM Udaipur director last week, something on strategy. I told him, Janath, this year, get companies who give job security. People will not go for startups this year. Okay? This year, companies will be chosen by students. Companies will give them a guarantee of a job for some time. So job security is at its highest right now, believe it or not. And that is a direct correlation of people feeling the pain of a slowdown.
Thank you.
Anything?
Your question is, how are we keeping ourselves motivated?
Yeah, as a
right?
team leader also.
Yeah,
That is
okay.
very important.
So first of all, let me just say that the government, in all fairness, is very concerned about the slowdown. And a lot of things, as you know, have been done in the last, since after July 5th, to try and get the economy going. So it's not that the government has a denial mode, and lot is happening. Okay. Now, see, first of all, I have always believed that you have to condition yourself never to be stressed, no matter how bad the situation is. And the reason I say that is that if you have a headache, that means if you are stressed, you can never think well. And in a slowdown is when your mind has to be at its best. And therefore, you have to condition. And there's no prescription, there's no sort of do these 5 things, not get stressed. But you have to condition yourself not to get stressed. That's number one. And number two, as a leader, as CEO, the whole organization is reading your body language. Not what you say, right, but your body language, right? And if your body language is showing signs of desperation or signs of hopelessness, then the whole organization will get demotivated. They don't get demotivated so much by reading the newspaper, but by watching what the CEO is displaying in his body language. Therefore, the job of keeping yourself, while you may be concerned about it, you may be thinking about what you need to do, but don't stress yourself and do not show a body language which is desperation or hopelessness.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, gentlemen, for this beautiful discussion. Just one final thought. Just reminds me of this Doha by Kabir. Sukh mein sumiran sab karai, dukh mein kare na koi. Jo sukh mein sumiran kare, to dukh kahe ko hoye. So the starting point to never wasting a slowdown is good behavior. Always control your costs, keep it low, good management principles and all of that, and you won't see. But of course, that is also loaded with presumption because it is all individual. But a lot of it can be imposed, external, global, all of that. On that note, thank you so much.
The two Rahim Dohas summarize everything. The two Rahim Doha, the one that I said, the one you said, summarize everything.